of
The Struggle is Real.
I was waiting for you not to do those jazz hands.
I did.
I was waiting.
Jazz.
Well, thanks guys for tuning in to another episode. Today, ladies and gentlemen, today we have a fantastic guest by the name of Frank Radice. Frank is, I don't even know how to describe him. He's amazing. He's just amazing. As you guys will see in the interview, he has such an impressive interview, and we're so glad to be interviewing him today. But of course, before we jump into the interview, we have to go into the topic of the day. Oh, I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Mahalia. I'm your host.
I'm Eric Francisco Medina.
And my name is Ryan Pack.
All right. Now that you know who we are,
Yeah.
if you don't already, let's talk about our topic of the day. Well, guys, I think we should talk about what our favorite musicals are.
Ooh.
And
Can I go first?
What musicals we hate. But yeah, go first.
So one of my favorite musical is Hamilton. I haven't watched it, but I've
Then it can't be your favorite.
But I listened to the soundtrack,
music, right?
Yeah, the music, the soundtrack.
Too.
Okay.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I really...
Soundtrack is amazing, yeah.
Really
No, the
love
soundtrack
the
is great, yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to...
Way to be a basic bitch, Ryan.
But
I'm just
hey,
kidding.
oh, I'm basic.
Wow.
Just pick the most obvious one.
So-
Oh, is that it? You know what?
Eric?
My favorite musical is called Talento de Barrio. It's a movie about Daddy Yankee. It's not a musical, but it shows.
Oh my God, you're such a Boricuan. Daddy Yankee?
Boricua.
Boricua?
It's like he stars in it, and it has a lot of reggaeton in it.
Oh my
It's
God.
not technically a musical, but I love it.
Thank you for being a stereotype.
I don't care.
Just kidding.
With pit bulls and neck tattoos.
Oh my God.
I think I'm gonna say Hamilton too.
Hell
I mean,
yeah.
you guys know that I'm not the biggest fan of
Basic.
musicals.
I know you also love Lin-Manuel Miranda.
the other one that I really like is the other
the
one I
Heights?
hate. It's In the Heights.
I thought so.
It's an amazing soundtrack. I've seen bits and pieces, of the musical, but yeah, you go. I know that you know more about
musicals.
I did. I went to art high school, which was basically
Fancy.
Glee.
Wow.
But more cutthroat.
Oh, like how cutthroat?
Like
it's
people
tense.
would sabotage each other for
You're
auditions
kidding.
and stuff.
It's an
What?
art
Like,
high school. That's the
because
only thing to do.
So we had
right?
2 musicals a year.
Uh-huh.
The fall musical wasn't as big. It was held at the school. But the spring musical was the biggest one overall. And we would go to...
It's like
it was called the CPCC Theater, which was a community college in Charlotte, North Carolina. But it was in the middle, kind of like in the middle of the city. And they had a huge theater.
Wow.
And that's where, I think we were the only high school to hold our musicals at that theater every year. And it would bring in so many different people.
like scouts from universities.
Not just universities, that just bringing people from the area, and then around our region, we I guess we did good enough that we merited what was called the Bloomy Awards, which was basically the Tonys for all of the high schools in the area. And then if you won at the Bloomies, you would then go to, I think it was the Jimmy Awards, don't quote me on this, but that was held in New York. You would be a finalist. Like the best actor and best actress was chosen, was like you won, you would then go on to the Jimmy Awards in New York. And that's how I actually went to school with, you guys might not know her, but her name is Eva Nobilzada. And the first year at the Bloomy Awards, I believe she won Best Actress, and then she went to the Jimmy Awards. And then some agents saw her at the Jimmy Awards and loved her so much, they had her audition for Miss Saigon. And she ended up being the lead for Miss Saigon at the West End Theater in London. And she was Tony nominated. She was against like Bette Midler. She didn't win. But I mean, she was super young. She didn't even finish high school. She just left.
She's 24 years old.
And now she did Les Miserables. She had a movie that just came out called Yellow Rose, where she plays like a Filipino or a Mexican Filipino.
That's crazy.
Country singer who's also an undocumented immigrant, and I believe her mom gets like deported in the movie. I'm going down a rabbit hole in a tangent, but like it was competitive. Like we had some really good.
Do you guys have like sports in there or?
No, we had no sports.
That's the thing that it's gonna be so competitive. That's the only. But
if you wanted to do sports, you had to go to your local high school. If you were at our school and play for your.
So that was the only thing to do in the school, right? So everybody was just focused.
It was art, and it was. Like for the musicals, like I did technical theater because I was too afraid to act or sing or anything like that because I didn't feel like compared to everybody that was there, I was like, I'm gonna just shut the fuck up. But like we would rehearse in the morning. Like I'd be getting to school at like 5 a.m., 4 a.m. Class would start at 9 a.m. Classes would end at 4:15 p.m. And then we'd have rehearsals after class. So I wasn't getting home till like 9, 10, sometimes 11.
Wow.
And that was just how it was, especially for the spring musical, because that was our crowning jewel. And for my senior year, we did West Side Story. I know it's a musical you hate so much. Eric hates it, but competition was fierce because all the seniors wanted to play Maria and Tony.
Were they white?
Some of them were white, but Eva ended up playing, who was a junior at the time, and people were like, "Oh my god, I can't believe a junior got the lead role when there's so many seniors graduating and blah blah blah." But she's Mexican.
So she can play Maria. Look at me.
Yes, and then what was his name? His name's Christian something. He played Tony.
Yeah.
But yeah. Crazy. But anyway, I totally went off on a tangent.
Yeah. What's your favorite musical?
Favorite musical. I love the musical Memphis. Yes. It came out. It's fairly new compared to other musicals. But not as new as Hamilton, because Hamilton just came out.
Right.
But it's about this. It's like interracial love based in Memphis, Tennessee.
Wow, that's cool.
And it's just really, really good. I loved it. I loved everything about it. It was on Netflix at a time, and I loved the performances. And I love the music in it. Hairspray was one of my favorites. I've seen it live, but in the movie, I love the way Queen Latifah sings. And especially in the song I Know Where I've Been. And then Phantom of the Opera is like my all-time favorite musical. It is not an actual opera. I hate when people actually call it an opera because it's not. But Phantom of the Opera, all-time favorite. All-time favorite. There was a time where I wanted to like pay for singing lessons because I wanted to be like the Black Christine. I wanted to sing so badly. I just love everything about that musical. I forced Brendan to sit and watch it with me. 15 minutes in, he's like, I can't do this. Because it's like the 25th anniversary one is like 3 hours long.
Oh my gosh,
no.
3
But
hours?
it's so good. It's with Raymond Cameron Lowe and Sierra Burgess, who I think was almost the voice of Little Mermaid, I think. I need to look her up. But they were really good. They were so good. It was my favorite musical.
Okay.
Eric, why do you hate West Side Story?
Because it's racist. It plays in a lot of stereotypes.
Just so you guys know, Eric wrote his thesis.
My thesis is titled the Othering in West Side Story, Toxic Depictions of Puerto Ricans and Latinx in Film. Because that film basically plays on the stereotypes of Puerto Ricans. And obviously at that time, Puerto Ricans moved to New York, and there was a lot of frictions between other communities in New York City, and it plays a lot on the sexualization of Latin American culture. It plays a lot on stereotypes, the angry Latino man. Rita Moreno, which is one of my favorite actresses, she went through hell.
They make her dark. They made her darker. They make her dark in the show.
Yeah. And she suffered a lot. After that, the repercussions of being in every role that she wanted to audition for, it was basically a maid or just a poor Puerto Rican or Latinx woman, and it was just really toxic. And people still want to talk about West Side Story like it's the biggest thing in the world. It's just full of toxic stereotypes, and I can go on about this topic forever. But I mean, you still have it on high schools. The high school kids, white kids, get tanned to play.
Oh my God!
Yeah, Eric, that's a big thing.
I told you about this.
Yeah,
right?
You told me about your story, but if you research it, there's a lot of high schools and it's like what? Whoa. That's brown face, guys.
Just so you guys know, right? So.
Oh my gosh, what is it?
When my high school did West Side Story, there was another high school who was doing West Side Story. Now, our director had casted well because he actually casted Hispanic. At this other school, it was a private Christian school that was predominantly white.
Okay.
And so me and my friends were like, let's go scope out the competition and like let's go see their show just to know like what we're up against at the Bloomies.
Right.
We went and I was horrified.
Oh my gosh, what happened?
Because they were all spray tan.
Oh my god.
Everyone that was playing the Puerto Ricans, this was clearly like blonde hair, blue-eyed, girls. Who were, some of them wore contacts, some of them didn't, like brown-eyed contacts. They had really, really bad black curly wigs to try and mimic the times. And then
that was what?
They were spray tanned.
5 years ago, 6 years ago?
I mean, that was 2012.
It still happens today.
8 years ago.
And
it was so bad. Yeah. I sat in the audience just like... And, like, all the parents are like, look at my baby, a star. I'm like, oh, my God, please.
And it's
sorry, I think my light just flashed.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I'm mad about it. I mean, the big song of West Side Story is America, which is say Puerto Rico, go or drunk. What's it called? Sink yourself to the ocean, whatever.
What's the sister's name in it?
Who, Maria or
no, not
Anita?
Anita.
Yeah.
We had a black Anita. Our Anita was black and she had dreads.
There you go. But it's just, I'm tired of that. It's just a movie that perpetuates. I can talk English. Yeah, I can talk English today. It's just toxic, and I'm really mad.
I do want to make a correction. When I was talking about Phantom of the Opera, her name is Sierra Boggess, and she played Little Mermaid on Broadway.
Okay. That's cool.
She played Ariel on Broadway, not the movie Little Mermaid. But
But
those
before
are my
you go,
music.
what's your favorite the musical that you hate?
Musical that I hate.
Do you have any musicals that you hate?
Right? I don't like Grease. I don't like Grease. I think it's because I had a personal experience with it. Because in middle school we did the play. I didn't much care for it. You know what it is? I think it's because there's no people of color in it, and I was like, what if I wanted to play a character? Where the fuck are you gonna put me?
Like they do background with people of color. Go to the background.
Musicals.
Right. Be the quirky best friend.
That was a really big thing though. Like growing up, because I loved musicals, I was like, outside of the fucking Color Purple and fucking Lion King, where do I fit into this shit? Because I don't just want to play like the Queen Latifah's character in Hairspray. Like, where am I?
Yeah.
In any of this? Like, I even love, like, Newsies was one of my favorite musicals as well. That's all white people. Most of it. All the leading roles are white people. There's one girl written in the musical. But if you watch the Disney movie, all men. All white men. And I was just sit there and just wonder, where's me? Yeah. Where's my representation?
Yeah. I imagine that. I mean, I think it happens to
it happens to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And Like, I mean, we have sister actors. There's obviously a huge disparity between the big musicals are mainly all white leads. And I think it's more of a problem in musicals than film. I mean, don't quote me on that. But from the knowledge that I have, there's more of a representation of people of color on film and TV than there are in musicals, I feel. I mean, that's my opinion.
Look at the biggest diverse musical when it happened, Hamilton. That was what, 2016, 17?
Yeah.
It was recent. And it was just people playing people. There was nothing attached to the color of the skin.
Legally Blonde is one of my favorite musicals too.
Yeah.
There's like one black girl in it.
Yeah.
Wait, Legally Blonde?
The musical.
They did a musical about it.
But there's a film too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But they're not related.
The film is with Reese Witherspoon, but in that.
But it's not related to the musical, right? Or is it? Are they?
Yeah, I think so, right?
It's basically a copy paste.
Oh, I did not know that. Wow. Okay.
Almost.
But it's the same.
It's the same story.
The same story.
Same characters.
Yeah, it's just musical.
So they just turned it into a musical. Like how they did Sister Act. Sister Act is a movie, but they turned it into a musical as well. Same people, same story.
Yeah, that was the question I was asking.
And this one, this movie is super weird, but I kind of like it. The Heathers. Heathers with Winona. It was with, I forgot her last name. Wow, Winona.
Ryder?
Yeah, her. It's basically they go into a killing spree of the bad girls of the school.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's a movie, but then I what's it called? Found out that it was a musical, and it's like a dark Mean Girls.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow!
But obviously Heathers came first. It's funny. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's we should wrap up.
I think that's it. Yeah.
We have a lot of good stuff with our next.
Sorry, guest. I could go on and on about musicals. There are so many that I love that I really just.
I imagine, yeah.
But yes, we should jump into Frank.
Yeah.
Now Frank has a Wikipedia, so I'm not gonna read everything. But that's just to let you know that he has so much experience. But Frank Radice is a television industry executive, businessman, and he's an author. He resides in New York City and London, England. He travels back and forth. Radice currently serves as a managing partner of Vita FR Company, a promotion, marketing, media, and consulting firm with offices in New York City, Los Angeles, and London. He also serves as the expert in residency at Definition 6, an Atlanta-based unified digital marketing agency. In 2007, he oversaw the marketing of Where in the World is Matt Lauer, which became a successful online NBC Today show franchise and was sold to Hyundai Motors under a sponsorship agreement. Frank has also coordinated a deal between NBC Universal and Procter & Gamble that launched PetSide.com, a website catering to the pet industry. He and his wife also wrote a book together as well. So Frank has loads of experience. You guys are just going to have to wait until we interview him to hear more about him, but he's amazing. Erik and I had the opportunity to actually pitch a show to him, and he has served as a mentor for the both of us. So we're excited to interview him today. So without further ado, let's call Frank.
So, Frank, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to have you, and we know that this is going to be a great conversation. But before we start with all of the other questions, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for inviting me because, when I met you all at SCAD, and we went through that pitch process, I was duly impressed with what you guys did and what you had to say and how you presented yourselves. And so it's my pleasure to be a part of this with you guys, first of all.
Thank you.
Thank
you so much.
So now, a little bit about me. Okay, so this is a book, so I'm going to shorten it. So I was a musician in my first life, and I played a lot and traveled with a number of pretty well-known bands back in the 70s and 80s. made a bunch of records and did some studio work. And at the same time, I was going to college, and it was early in the sort of television world in schools. So I went to the University of Maryland, and they had a department of radio, television, and film, which was pretty unusual at the time. It was 1968. So it was the height of the Vietnam War, and it was, Washington, D.C. area. It was a, pretty volatile community.
Right.
So while I was studying radio, television, and film, and I thought, well, wouldn't this be interesting if I could, because by the time the radio and TV department was part of the speech department, so fine arts, not journalism. I thought, well, why don't we get the journalists together with the school chancellor and try and do a debate about why at the time classes were being struck by the students. That was their way it was their anti-war stance, was to strike classes. Wow. And huge marches with lots of tear gas and all that stuff that happened. And so that was my first foray into understanding a little bit about how television worked in journalism. A few years later, before I graduated, I got a job at a film lab where I learned how to process film, but I also learned how to shoot film, and I also learned how to edit film. And I was taught by this German fellow, because Germany has this intense program of teaching you how to be a filmmaker, that you must go through a process with them. It's not unlike learning how to, work with horseshoes or make being a blacksmith, or say it was treated as a craft, and you had to go through this real heavy process to learn. You couldn't even pick up the camera until you learned how to strip the camera and clean it and all of that. So it was really intense.
Wow.
So I learned how to shoot, and I learned how to do audio, and I learned how to edit, as well as process the film and clean the floors in the lab and all that stuff. And one day, the governor of Georgia, George Wallace, who was running for president at the time, was shot in Washington, D.C. And we decided to go and shoot the aftermath of that. I was the cameraman. So that was my first opportunity to actually do something in journalism.
Yeah.
Not too long after that, I became a film editor at a local station in the WNBC, which is the NBC station in Washington. So it was really their premier station. It was where all the news was happening. It was really lucky. My brother owned a bar that was near the station, and one day a guy came in and said, I guess he was in a drunken stupor, anybody here know somebody that wants to be a film editor? My brother said, yeah, maybe my brother does. He's studying that stuff. I got the job the next day.
Wow.
No, I was working there. Now it's 1972, and I'm working on the weekends, because only the lowliest of the low worked on the weekends. Everybody was home on the weekends. So it was Watergate. And Nixon decided that he was going to fire everybody, kind of like what Trump was doing. It was called the Saturday Night Massacre, and I was the only person at the office at the time. So all this Watergate material came in, and I had to do all of this stuff that I was unfamiliar with, and call people in, and suffice it to say that I did well. And a few weeks later, I was working as a film editor at ABC News in Washington, where I spent the next 15 years. As a film editor, and then an assignment editor, and then an associate producer, and then a producer, and then a program producer, and a senior producer. I traveled all over the world and covered war zones, and worked in the White House and regulatory agencies, acted. And in those days, what a producer did was they were directors. So a producer, not unlike what they are in the movie business, where a producer coordinates everything. Well, yeah, you coordinated it, but you also went out with the camera crew and told them what you needed shot. And then you came back and oversaw the edit session. So producer was more of a director. So I went through that whole process and ended up becoming a program producer, and I started producing shows. when the hostages were taken in Iran in 1979, and they created a show called Nightline, and I was one of the premier first producers of that show. This is the pattern that was happening in my career. I was in the right place at the right time, many times. So, George Wallace, Watergate, the Iran hostage crisis. It was fortuitous, and it was interesting, and it's a really long way from when I was a rock and roll guitar player, traveling with bands around the country and trying to go to college. And at the same time, by the way, stepping back into the college time, there was a thing called the lottery in 1968. And the lottery was if you were between if you were 18 years old or between the ages of 18 and about 21, they put a number they were ping pong balls with numbers on them, and they would reach into it and pull it out, and it would tell you whether or not you had to go to Vietnam. Basically, you were drafted.
Oh, wow.
And so the numbers were like from 1 to, I want to say 365, so 1 for each day of the year. And I was number 32, which basically meant I was going to go to Vietnam. Wow. So I enlisted in the Navy and immediately was thrown out because I had a hearing problem. Didn't even know I had a hearing problem. Ended up going back to school. So I avoided. I avoided Vietnam. But the interesting part of the story is that in the late 70s and early 80s is when I became the war zone producer for ABC News. So I ended up in Beirut and El Salvador, Nicaragua and Guatemala and Honduras and Panama and everywhere there was, in the Falkland, wherever there was fighting, I ended up going. And as a journalist, I went without a weapon.
Right.
Yeah. So then moving forward now. So I have gone into producing Nightline, and then got an offer to go and do something that was really different. I got really tired of traveling all over the world, and I got tired of getting shot at. So I was asked if I wanted to become a Directors Guild member and join Paramount Motion Pictures and be a director on Entertainment Tonight. So I said, geez, that sounds like a lot of fun. I'll do that. And I became the music director. So every big musician that came into New York at the time, by now I'd moved to New York, I got the opportunity to go and interview. Suffice it to say, I also interviewed every great guitar player that I was enamored with. So, from Jeff Beck to Eric Clapton, I talked to Freddie Mercury. I interviewed, amazing. B.B. King. I mean, literally, it was a fantastic job. So while I was doing this, I decided to pitch a show to CNN that was like Entertainment Tonight, but done more like journalism. So I wanted to combine what I'd learned about entertainment news with what I knew about hard news. So take Nightline and put it together with Entertainment Tonight and come up with something different, which I did. And then CNN hired me. And I went and I created a show called Showbiz Today, which lasted for about 15 years, I think, at CNN. I only produced it for the first 5 years. And so that was great. But what I had done was seal my fate, as it were, to not being recognized as a hard news producer anymore. So I had now slipped over from being a newsman to being an entertainment guy, which was okay. I had a nice long run at ABC News, and now I'm trying to find my sea legs again. And that was that little space between CNN and Entertainment Tonight. And I got offered a job to go back to ABC News and work in a brand new unit called ABC News Interactive. Now, again, remember, I'm a writer, producer, director, musician.
Everything.
So I got so I'm doing all this stuff. And this new unit, ABC News Interactive, and this was 1988. So now that's really an early time for people to start getting into the sort of the digital world.
Right.
So what happened was Apple Computers worked with a software company and created a way to manufacture. You create laser discs, which would be controlled by an Apple computer. And honestly, if you played with the Apple computer against the laser disc, it felt like the internet. So we did a project, for example, called it was the life and times of Martin Luther King. And so you could play the entire I Have a Dream speech, for example. And you'd see the words of the speech come up on the computer in sync with what was playing on the television screen or on your computer screen, what was the output of the Laserdisc. But you could highlight a line in there and hit return, and it would just play on the Laserdisc that line that you highlight. Whoa. So it was really an accurate thing. You could type in, hey, I want to know, a little bit about what happened in Memphis. And you'd hit enter, and it would immediately take you to that part of the story of the life and times of Martin Luther King. We did many of those laser discs. We did one on the earthquake in 79 San Francisco, or 89, I guess it was 89 San Francisco. We did one on drugs and substance abuse. We did one on the powers of the Congress and the presidency. So it was a whole number. And what the idea was, ABC News had been around for a long time, and all of the material that they had shot was in a library. And this was a way to use the entire ABC News library along with this really cool interactive technology. So we had to write, produce, direct, and edit these things. And then I created the music for them in a little studio that I built with a MIDI studio. And then we would have to go out, the individual producers, and sell them to the school systems around the country. So we then had to become salespeople. So we had to go and say, here, I went to Tallahassee to try and sell them to the Florida school system. Here, Tallahassee, you need to buy 1,000 of these laser discs, and you need to buy 1,000 of these laser disc players, and you need to buy 1,000 of these software packages, and so on. So, but anyways, a year and a half later, almost 2 years later, died. It went away. It went away because the internet could do it better and faster, and that's when everybody dove into taking their libraries and digitizing them and putting them on the internet, because there was no reason. Laserdiscs was a passing fancy. There weren't even DVDs at the time. So I'm now out of work for the first time in like 20 years. And I was just, what am I going to do? This is just crazy. I don't quite know what to do now, because I thought I had gotten to that job, that this really sort of futuristic television job that involved the digital world. I thought I had gotten to where I needed to be. And this guy from the marketing department, or this guy that I worked with, who was my boss at the time, an executive producer, said, why don't you go up and talk to the marketing department? You've been doing 12 and 13-minute pieces for the last 10 years. Maybe you can do a 30-second promo. So I went up to the marketing department, and 2 years later, I was running the marketing department at CBS. At CBS News. and then 4 years later, I was running the marketing and promotion department at NBC on the East Coast. And then a few years after that, I was the executive vice president of the marketing department at NBC, doing news, sports, and entertainment. So I was in charge of all the news programs. We launched MSNBC. I also did any of the entertainment shows that were produced on the East Coast. So that included Saturday Night Live and Conan O'Brien and the last call with Carson Daly. So, and all the soap operas that were produced on the East Coast. So at the time, I don't even remember which soap opera it was, but it was one of the things that I was in charge of doing. And it was a big team, and that lasted for another 18 years. So I get to the end of that 18-year period of time, and that included a lot of all the same kind of stuff: writing, producing, directing, and editing. And during that period of time, I co-wrote the theme song for the Today Show that ran for 12 years. It was called America's First Family. Ended when the family broke up. And when it was no longer Katie, Matt, Alan, Ann, first on your TV, America's First Family, today on NBC. That was a terrific thing for me, because it gave me some cred as a writer, as a songwriter, and it gave me a piece of music that lasted a very long time. And quite honestly, it was lucrative, because I received royalties for that that many years, and then for a few years after. But as all good things must come to an end, I reached that retirement age. I'm there, and I got out with with a good retirement package, which is really good. But I was also still itching to do stuff. Can you hear my music in the background?
It's okay.
Stop. It's Art Pepper. I'm really just phenomenal jazz fan. It's not. I'm sorry about that. And
that's okay. It's okay.
You want to go back to the beginning? Just kidding. I was trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do, and I became a independent consultant. So I started my own company, and was pretty lucky and got a client based in Atlanta, a company named Definition 6, which is an advertising agency, which did basically all the same stuff that I'd been doing my entire career. So they were a post-production house, they were an advertising agency, they did digital work, they were a graphic design house, they did media buying, media planning, all the same stuff that you do when you're in the advertising business, which is what the NBC agency, of which I was the EVP, was. The NBC agency was an advertising agency in NBC, and it did all that stuff. So it wrote, it produced, it directed. We did print ads, we did billboards, we did television commercials, we did radio spots, we did all that stuff. And then we had the media planet, then we bought the media. So they were very, very big budgets, lots of money, millions of dollars. Wow. So that was a great thing. And to leave that behind wasn't the easiest thing in the world for me. I was used to limos and Learjets. By the time I got out, however, the world had significantly changed. There are no, unless you're, the owner of 20th Century Fox, there are no limos and Learjets anymore. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't exist. And the kind of money that was spent back then isn't being spent now. They'll still spend a lot of money to market something. You don't, if you make a major motion picture, at least a third of the total budget's going to be in the marketing. So marketing's really, really important. Don't let anybody kid you. If it's like, if you don't know that the tree fell, then maybe the tree never fell. You got to make people change. You got to do something that gets people to change their behavior. And in the case of television, changing behavior means changing the channel, going to something that you've marketed well enough to make them want to watch it. So I had that client, and then I started to build a pretty solid base of clients over the next couple or 3 years, and then I got involved in launching television channels, which is something that actually I have just finished working on. I was working on the launch of a 24-hour news channel in the Middle East.
Wow.
Interesting to do this from 6,000 miles away, or in this case, probably only 4,000 miles, much closer than if I was there. But it's all been being done virtually. So the whole working from home thing has been an interesting process, especially when you're working with the people that are making the music, or working with the people that are buying the global media, or working with the people that are creating the logo and the branding and all of that stuff. There's a whole separate team that are creating and building the sets and hiring the staff and creating what's going to work in that country and in the outlying bureaus. So it's been a really intense project for me for the last 7 months. But I've built up a clientele. And now I'm working with a pretty amazing group of people in what I choose to see as the future of media, and that is voice technology and AI. So anyway, that's where I've come from, and basically what I've done. Probably somewhere in there I left something out, but
that's amazing.
You have a very impressive background.
Well, I'm also old, so I've been around a long time.
That's great.
Oh my goodness. So being that you have a background in all types of storytelling, what to you makes a good story? Whether it be news or television.
It's all the same to me. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I actually like a story that has a circle. So it comes full circle. So it has a beginning that it doesn't necessarily have to end at the beginning of that circle, but it has to often go back to that point.
Yeah. Right.
So I think that sort of the idea of circuitous storytelling is something that I'm interested in. I'm also interested in stories where they write themselves. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. So in the early days of Nightline, the reporters didn't want to work on Nightline because they would come in and work on Good Morning America at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then Nightline came on at 11:30 at night. Yeah. Nobody wanted to stay.
Right.
Yeah.
I would pitch a story to Ted Koppel or the executive producer Bill Lord and say, okay, so who's the correspondent that I'm going to go out in the world and do this with? And I would often get, well, no, you go figure out how to do it without one. So the first time I did that, I went out and I did an interview with a guy named Art Patak, who was the writer for the Chicago Sun-Times for the mob in Chicago. And his interview was so compelling that I brought the interview back and I tied all the sound bites together in such a way that they told the story that I wanted to tell. And since I was doing the interview, I could also help guide this story so that it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then cover it with interesting footage that we had in our library. So that's like the first example of what became known in the media business in New York as a Patak, based on this guy's name, Art Patak. So that we called him a Patak, and they still to this day call him that. And eventually, I learned how to go out and do 10, 12, 15 interviews, bring them all in together, and then build a story based on all of the different pieces of sound that I got from the various people that I did these interviews with, and then would cover it with footage that either we had in the library or I went out and shot. So interesting story about that. So anyway, that to me it's sort of the essence of documentary filmmaking. If you watch a documentary and you get sucked in by the voiceover. So somebody's written a really great track and it's a good script and all of that. But then all of a sudden there's this 5-minute piece in the middle of it that is all natural sound. Mm-hmm. That to me says, oh, wow, that sucked me right in. That's what this was all about. This was about letting the story get told by the people who are involved in the story. I honestly think that the next level of that is to be able to write the way you think somebody will talk. Mm-hmm. So to me, that, those are some of the most important elements of storytelling. So the spoken word, the way people think, the circuitous nature of a story, because and a beginning, a middle, and an end. Because if you don't have that, you don't understand where that is, and you don't see where that's going. You don't know how to sort of box in what that story is, and otherwise you'll end up with, like, suppose you could be really lucky like George Lucas and have 25 versions of Star Wars. But the point is, if you take a look at the original Star Wars movie, it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. It interestingly, the end managed to take you to another place. Mm-hmm. But it was how that movie worked, not just because it was a mind-blowing experience. It worked because it told a really good, simple story that actually could have been told in a Western in a movie in the 1930s. So to me, that is like an essence of good storytelling. And storytelling is the centerpiece of all that we do in television and film and audio. There's a group called the Firesign Theater that were very popular comedians in the 60s, and they did these comedy albums that basically sounded like movie soundtracks. So they were a group of them. They did all the voices, they did all the sound effects, and they were scored like movies, and you could close your eyes and you could see what they were talking about. It was another great thing. Sound. To me, the key to all of this is the sound. Sound is more than 50% of a movie or a television show. Sound to me is more like 70% of a movie or a television show. And that applies not just to the piece, the film or the television show, but it also applies to the marketing. of the film and the television show, because how often have you seen a great movie trailer and then not like the movie? Because because the trailer took the best parts of the movie and told a little story in less than a minute or less than 2 minutes. And that's what good marketing is. A funny story about the Patak. I went to after I'd been at Nightline for years and created that technique. I at CNN, I was in the cafeteria one day, and so some people were talking about the Patak, and somebody says, I think the guy that invented that has an office upstairs. And the answer the other kid said was, no, I think he's dead.
Oh,
no. So I leaned in and I said, I'm here to tell you, I'm not dead.
Sorry to disappoint. I'm still alive.
Yeah. You want to learn how to do this? Come on up to my office.
Right.
That's another thing. I honestly, I have a strong feeling and a sense of you if you're successful. If you don't help other people, then the hell with you.
Right.
It is a terrible thing to waste an opportunity for someone to mentor somebody or to give somebody a break or to understand. And I'll tell you to me, the ultimate story of that. So when I was working at ABC News in Los Angeles, we had this old Jewish guy working at the assignment desk. His name was Seymour Kravitz. Seymour Kravitz's nickname was Cy. I did not know that Cy Kravitz was married to Roxy Roker, who was this black woman who was married to a white guy that lived above the Jeffersons in the TV show, The Jeffersons. But this was like, an example of an interracial marriage that I was working next to for years and just didn't know. Mm-hmm. So one day, Cy Kravitz comes up to me and he says, so I know you play the guitar. Would you listen to my kid Lenny's guitar playing? And I said, Cy, I'm kind of busy. And I blew off Lenny Kravitz.
Oh my God.
So now, as bad as that story is, about 30 years later, Lenny Kravitz is playing on the Today Show, and I'm in charge of marketing the Today Show. So I decide to go downstairs and tell Lenny this story. And who should be standing in the audience but his father?
Oh my God.
Who says to me, hey, Frank, let me introduce you to my son, Lenny. And he says, Lenny, come on over here. This is the guy that blew you off when you were 10 years old.
Oh my God.
That is crazy.
Never in my life again, ever, said no. Regardless of what, because you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Honestly, I can sit here and give you all sorts of excuses about, I was too busy. I wasn't playing the guitar every day anymore. Of course I had the time to do it. I was in California, for God's sakes. And Nightline came on so late at night that I had most of the day to do nothing. It was just crazy. I would come to work at 6:00 at night, and Cy was working the overnight assignment desk. That was another thing. You don't work you're working the overnight assignment desk was like working on the weekends. It was relegated to the people who either were just starting out or were at the end of their career. And I just didn't, it never connected with me. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. I should have noticed that he was driving in and out of work every day in a Bentley. I didn't notice that, and I guess that was his wife's doing, because he certainly wasn't making that kind of money working for ABC News in the 80s. But anyway, so I feel really strongly about that. I think that's another secret that people need to understand as their careers go on. If you don't share, and if you don't care, then what good are you? That's kind of how I feel, and I think that's very important to me. And that was the lesson that I learned from that crazy moment.
Yeah, that's a very important lesson for everyone to learn. I love that story.
There is another thing that I'm really stuck on in terms of mentoring somebody and giving them a piece of advice about what it is. Because I assume you're going to end up going there anyway, so I'm going to just jump there. And that is not to make a quantum leap in your career. Don't get out of college and because you've directed a college film, think you're going to go and direct a feature film. Now,
right.
You could. Steven Spielberg directed a great feature film while he was in college. I think it was USC, the one with the truck. It was a pretty amazing film, you know. And then he got out of college, and boom, he was a pretty successful director, I would say. But don't try to make a quantum leap. Try and learn the steps of the jobs, which is, as I sort of a point I was making by all the things that I did in my life, so that you don't get to a point where you can't work with a team of people and have them understand that you know what it is that they do, because you've either done it or you've lived it. It's really important to not jump in and be telling people that you count on how to do a job that they know how to do better than you do, unless you know enough to not say something. And I think that that's really important. To me, it's about a ladder. And the closer you can stay to being on every step of that ladder before you get to that pinnacle, the better you're going to be in your life and in your career. I think it works in everything about your life. It is, you will have hard knocks and you will learn stuff in life without having somebody help you get there. Nor will you see everything as a teachable moment.
Yeah.
But as you get older, you can look back and say everything was a teachable moment. And how did it fit into that ladder in terms of who I am and what I do?
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Amazing. And that's great advice.
Yeah. And since you have worked in different networks and different people, let's say, in your opinion, what's the biggest flaw that the entertainment industry has as a whole?
I'm not sure that this is applicable.
Okay.
But it's something that I think about.
Yeah.
And that is that often chasing the profit dollar sometimes will interfere in the creative process. I've worked at places where a development team would work with a creator, change the story that the creator had in his mind or her mind to fit what they thought was going to be the thing that would make the most money, that might not necessarily be the most creative solution. I'm not saying that everyone does that, but I think that may be one of the biggest issues in the industry. Now, I will say there's a few things going on right now that kind of, belie that. We're here in the middle of coronavirus, and production, it didn't stop, but it halted. So what took over for live production or film production? Animation. Animation took over, because animation is something that you can do by yourself in a room with a computer. So I think that one of the things that we're going to, and it's unimpeded by the management process to a certain extent. I mean, I'm sure that if you were working at Disney and you were working on Frozen 2, you're going to get involved in their process.
Yeah.
But so much great animation and so much cool stuff is happening in that world right now. And I think the industry is seeing that. One of the other things that I think they're seeing is things are being greenlit to go direct to air or direct to, there's hardly any theatrical going on right now. So Netflix is a great example. Netflix and Amazon, great examples of greenlighting a project and then putting it directly onto air without having it go through the development and the pilot stages.
Right.
So I think that, it's proving to be very interesting. If you watch, look, you can't see everything that's on Netflix. Half of it's crap.
Yeah.
But the point is, the other half of it's not so bad, and that probably a half of that other half is really good. And a quarter of that other half is spectacular, and that works. And that's a new way of doing things. Man, quite honestly, they're spending $1 zillion, and don't have to worry about whether people go into a theater to watch it. They'll still spend the money to make a show that nobody watches, or that'll get, they don't want that. Nobody wants that. But, I find myself being drawn to things that people aren't talking about when I'm sort of skimming through Netflix and Amazon these days, because I feel like I've watched everything. I do have a couple of seriously big favorites on both channels. But I watch a lot of independent stuff, and I find a lot of it is really good. But again, like I said, a lot of it is really crap. The point is that it's being allowed to be made without the hindrance of a desire to need to make a profit. Now, that sort of gets to the argument of what is advertiser video on demand versus AVOD versus SVOD, which is subscription video on demand. Subscription video on demand is more likely to spend the money on something that's going to be a little bit more interesting, whereas advertiser video on demand is more likely to be more like television, that is broadcast television. And I think that there's a huge difference between what's happening in the world of what you see on your screen these days. So what you see in advertiser quantified content is more broadcast going to be things like breaking news, live events, and sports. Whereas drama and comedy are going to become, sort of the big part of subscription video on demand. So Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, and the like, but they all aren't going to survive. I was really surprised that Quibi.
I was just about to ask you what your thoughts on Quibi was, because I don't know anyone who actually has it.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it was a horrible name. But second of all, they promised that it would be some really cool stuff, and it turned out not to be. It was exactly what I was talking about, the kind of content that was overthought of by old-time television people. They offered nothing new and exciting. As a matter of fact, one of the things they said they were going to do was to go to YouTube influencers and Instagram influencers, people who create content for those platforms. And then when those influencers pitched them, they turned them down. So I think that, they did. Okay. You can read about that right now, which I thought was, wow, that was a bad idea. Also, I was a little bit concerned about the idea that Quick Bites was going to work. They thought everyone's going to be on their phone and they're going to, you know what? I watch a half-hour television show and I might watch it over the course of 5 different times. I'm not that interested. The only time I really want a quick bite is when I want to see funny cats.
Right.
I will start or some really cool martial arts thing. That's when I'm flipping through and I go, oh wow, look at that really neat martial arts thing. There's something I haven't seen before. And then cats that love their parents. That stuff. To me, and that's user generated content, or it's just really cool stuff. The problem with Quibi was it wasn't really cool stuff. The other thing about those new networks is it's going to be hard for anyone to compete. I don't think, for example, although Apple Plus has some interesting stuff on it, they are not in the same category as Amazon and Netflix.
Right.
Yeah.
Disney Plus has a niche, but I'll tell you that Disney Plus, the only thing I cared about on Disney Plus was The Mandalorian, and it was so good. And the fact is, it was produced in an entirely new way. It wasn't shot green screen. It wasn't shot on location. It was shot entirely in giant rooms filled with background projected, not background projected, but the LED screens. That could be changed and moved, and the cameras could move. and the screen positioning would move with it. It was really great high-tech way of producing
really great production
interesting
value.
content. And quite honestly, it could all be done in a studio. So basically you had the entire background and then some props and some set dressing in the foreground, but everything was done in the background. And except for the sets in the foreground, minor set pieces and individuals who moved in.
Yes.
So that was very cool. I don't know that I've seen anything else. Maybe if I was like 10 years old, I would be watching Disney more, because there's tons of content. So now that's the niche.
Yeah, it's people who are nostalgic about their childhood, people with kids, and then people who love Star Wars.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Yeah, all the Star. But I mean, I don't know how many times I can see the Star Wars movies. It's like how many times can I see the James Bond movies, or how many times can I watch The Godfather? I mean, it's, But the point is that it has its niche, and it will probably do okay based on that niche, and because Disney has this gigantic library of stuff.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how big they go with Hamilton being released today.
True.
I'm interested in how
Me
that
too.
works.
I mean, everyone's talking about it. Lin Moran, he's a brilliant guy, I honestly don't know how the content of that show is going to play. I haven't seen it yet on television. And I didn't see it in the theater either. So I'm one of those handful of people that didn't see it when I came to London.
It's okay. I bought my ticket right before COVID happened to see it live. And then COVID hit, and now I can't see it, and now it's online, and I'm out $200.
But you have to watch it, and something that I have to watch too. I see the clips of it. I love that guy. I think he's great. So I'd be curious to see. Look, that to me, that's one of those things that that sort of started with NBC starting to do the musicals and Broadway shows on television. They started live. They did them live. Yeah. And I thought that was an interesting concept, and it had an audience, and it worked really well. And I think that that's a great place for broadcast television to be. Kind of surprised that SVOD were the ones that dumped into it, but maybe it's because it's such a hot property and it's contemporary. Look, the story of Hamilton and the story of what's going on with our current government are not so disparate. There are plenty of parallels, and so the timing of it is right.
Right.
And the fact that it is new and it's different, that it might work. But look, I don't think that a couple of shows out there will make the network. So I'm curious to see how all that works. But the bottom line is they're all not going to survive. There's too many of them.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
And here's the other thing. Cable television, when it became a thing, which, by the way, the original cable television was called CATV. So what does CATV means? It means cable antenna television. So if you live in I think it's cable antenna television, community antenna television. That's what it was. Okay. Community antenna television. So what that meant was, if you lived in West Virginia and you lived in the valley and you had mountains on either side, they would put an antenna on the top of the mountain and run a cable down to your house. Cable TV. That was the original cable TV. The next generation of that, HBO did with an antenna. So they would put an antenna on the top of your house, and they would send the signal to that antenna, but it would only be a signal that came from HBO, and you had to be somewhere nearby. It wouldn't take regular television. It was just the HBO signal. Then eventually they started laying cable. Now, cable started to add HBO. Oh, well, you can't just make it with HBO. So let's put all the other channels on it. So NBC, ABC, CBS, because now you'll get a better signal. And others said, well, now we have this thing called cable. There's like 100 million households that have this cable that's finally connected us. Let's create some new channels. So USA and Sci-Fi and Bravo and TNT and so on and so on and so on and so on. Now you're the cable company, Time Warner or Spectrum or whatever it's called these days. And you say, okay, you want to buy this cable for your house? You got to buy 140 channels, and you got to pay me $75 a month. Whether you look at only 4 of those channels, you still have to buy those 75 channels. Nobody cared about that in the beginning. Comes now to IPTV, so Internet Protocol Television, Netflix, Amazon, and so on. And you go, well, you know what? I don't need all these 150 channels. I don't need to pay $50 a month. I'll pay $7 a month for Amazon and cut the cable. Right. So, hey, how great is that? Except, well, you know, Netflix has better stuff. So I think I'll buy Amazon, $12. So now I'm up to $18 a month. But damn, Hulu's got some really cool stuff. Plus I can get live TV like I used to be able to get on the antenna.
Yeah.
That's another $18. So now I'm up to $36. Now, you know, this Disney thing doesn't look so bad. $7 more. God, I got it. Right, if I'm going to have all this, I may as well have Apple. Now you've got a bundle again, and you're up to the same money.
Yeah.
Little do people. So what's happened is IPTV has become the new cable. Yes. Now, I discovered. I recently bought an apartment in New York that was very high up in a building with absolutely nothing around it. So I was looking out at the river. It was really terrific. I put an antenna on a 4K television set, and I get all the local channels plus about 30 other free channels for absolutely nothing.
Nice.
And the quality is it's uncompressed HD video. So if you can use an antenna on your television set, you will get uncompressed HD video if it's being broadcast in your area. So all I did was I didn't buy the cable, which was going to cost me $96. I just bought the internet. So I bought a Wi-Fi router. I'm paying $39 a month for my Wi-Fi, and I installed an Amazon Fire Stick, which gets just about everything. And so and that was like, I don't remember, it was $30.
Right.
And I think it cost me $6 or $7 a month. And I'm now getting everything I want. I can get advertiser supported. I can get subscription video because I can just choose it and download it as an app, or I can watch live television. I got everything I want. It cost me like a third of what it would have cost me, and certainly even what it's costing me here in the UK.
Right.
Because it's easy to get sucked in. But without people buying it, those organizations aren't going to be able to pay for the production. And in the end, it's all about good storytelling and great content. Nobody's going to watch it if it's got bad storytelling and bad content. Look at what happened with YouTube. YouTube went from being just a user-generated content thing of cats and martial arts clips to a place where you can go ahead and watch movies and television and really good stuff on YouTube. There's a lot of places out there to watch content. You can watch content on Instagram, as you know. You can watch content you can watch TikTok. The point again is it's got to be compelling, and it's got to be worth watching. I actually think that if I would spend money on content if it was worth watching, even if I wasn't willing to spend a lot on it.
Right.
I agree.
Frank, we could ask you a million more questions, but unfortunately we are all out of time. But thank you so much for doing this. You are a wealth of knowledge. I know Eric and I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Great interview.
Yeah.
Eric, so great. It was great to see you guys again. I'm sorry I talked so much. I feel
this was great. This is exactly how I love the interviews to go, is just having a full conversation and learning so much from the other person. So thank you so much. This was perfect.
My pleasure.
Before we go, we do have to ask you, what is your favorite movie and your favorite television show?
So my favorite movie is The Godfather, the first Godfather. I will also say that that maybe my second favorite movie, because it's tough for me, is Blade Runner, the original. So those. As a matter of fact, I brought the art director of Blade Runner to SCAD the year before last, and it was probably one of the best panels that ever happened.
Wow, that's great.
I was his best man. So David Snyder. And my favorite television show this is going to surprise you, but it's a show called Bosch.
Yes, I know it.
Yeah, it is by far.
Yeah.
It's tough for me because I actually like a show called The Good Fight a lot, which is just spectacular. It's on CBS.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but it's unbelievably good and it's real timely. But my favorite television, I could go way back and start talking about that, but I don't want to do that. I want to stay contemporary. Bosch is an unbelievably well done show with terrific acting. That is the real life story of being a detective in Los Angeles. It's just a great show.
Nice.
Guys, watch. Good
choices,
list, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Frank.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah. All right, guys. We hope you enjoyed that interview with Frank. That Lenny Kravitz story.
I know. So crazy. Always mentor, guys. Always be nice.
Yes. Be nice. Mentor. Don't say no.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that interview was amazing.
It was great.
I've learned so much just from this short amount of time that we were talking. We hope you guys enjoyed it too. As always, please give us a like and a listen. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. The more you support this channel, the more it helps us grow. You can also become a monthly subscriber, whether it's $1, $5, or $20. Every penny counts, and we appreciate it. Yeah. And also check out our merch store. If you haven't already, please get your Struggle is Real t-shirts, mugs, hats, dog bandanas, everything else like that. Any last closing words, guys?
I think that's the main thing of the story was to always be nice. You never know who's going to be.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So be a good person.
Hashtag Hamilton. Yeah. You know, I think that's a line from Hamilton too.
Is it really?
I think so.
Are you sure?
I am pretty sure.
Okay. But yeah, just be nice with people, man.
Yeah.
Get too far.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to go reevaluate my life. So we'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next.
Take care, guys.